Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. This is episode number 54. I am Jared Smith, host of the Group Project Podcast. It's Saturday, just a beautiful day outside here in the Midwest. Finally hitting 40 degrees, it's been a rough month and a half here, so we're happy to see that. Hey, I'm rolling solo today here, and I'm going to cover my top 10 books. Let me just give you a little bit of context here. Well, first of all, the show is about the podcast and my website, and a lot of the stuff I blog about is about leadership, education, and personal growth. Those three areas. I just love those three areas, how those three areas come together. I'm passionate about those areas. And it ends up that I've read a lot of books in those areas here, especially the last handful of years. I've been wanting to do a show. I guess once or twice a year I release my book rankings and send that out to my email list, my list of subscribers who email or who subscribe to my newsletter. And so they get a chance to see, I rank 1 to 100 of the top books that I've of all time that I've read. Just to give you an idea, last year I think I read like 70 or 80 books. The year before that was like 50. The year before that was like 30 or 40. I've been going more each year just because I've been trying to, I think I spend about 30 or 40 minutes a day, almost every single day on average, reading and then summarizing and adding those summaries to my website. So if you haven't been to my website, check it out, drjaredsmith.com. I think there's like 160, 170 book summaries where I just kind of tease out the biggest takeaways for me from those books. And then it's in a nice, like it's just organized real nice there. So again, if you're big on books, if you're big on leadership, education, personal growth, those three areas, I'm sorry, there's no fiction books. It's all nonfiction. But if you're big on books like that, check out my website. Ton to offer there. So let's talk about the 10, how do I rank my books? And it's so subjective. It's just based basically on how they impact me. Like, I'm sure you've read some books where you're like, this just isn't doing it for me. I'm not getting much from it. I'm not much learning much from it. Where other books you just can't put down and you're like, wow, that makes sense. Whoa, I haven't heard that before. Oh, I've thought that, and that helps. And by what I read helps to kind of confirm what I'm thinking. So my list is very subjective. I want to be very clear. And that's like one of the biggest things when I share my lists is sometimes people are like surprised by some of the books that are at the top of my list and maybe by where some of the books that they thought are really good are maybe a little bit lower. So it has nothing to do with like how well written it is, if that makes sense. Like there's some really amazing authors out there who use amazing words and can craft these amazing stories. And just, you can just tell they're amazing writers. But sometimes I don't get much from those. Like I just don't get much from stories sometimes, if that makes sense. I more want like get in, get out, get the material, see how it impacts my life and move on and see how it works. So there's some authors who are out there that I know some people I've talked to, they love their work. And I admit they're good writers, but I just don't get a whole lot from those books. So that's one thing. The other thing you're going to see, and I've heard this before on Twitter when I've shared my lists, is that, it is male dominated for sure. The list I'm going to share with you. And I wish there was something I could do about that. I don't know if that's just my being a male, being middle-aged male, being, I just, I've heard the criticism before, and I'm trying to like broaden what I read. Absolutely. I'm trying to get into more genres that maybe would be, more females or more minorities, I guess you could say. So I apologize ahead of time. I don't want anybody, it's just, these are the books that I have resonated with me, and there's nothing behind it. I'm not like intentionally uh you know choosing these books, if that makes sense. So I just want to be clear. I wanted to throw those out there ahead of time, that this is very subjective. These are the books that have made the most impact on me in my personal and professional life. And I just feel like I'm excited to share those books with you. I listen to podcasts a decent amount. I get questions. I got a question last week, like, hey, which podcast do you listen to? And I listen to a lot of different, like more of on the leadership side and business side, and then like try to like pull out what works well for educational leadership. So you're going to see a little bit of that in there. But I love those podcasts when they're like, hey, these books made a huge impact on my life. And I like listen to those and I write those down. And more often than not, I almost always just like purchase them on the spot. What I've learned, there's a quote out there by a guy who's not on my list. He wrote the book. Oh gosh, I will I will help you be rich. I cannot remember. His name is Ramit Sethi. His last name is Sethi. So it looks like Sethi, but I believe it's Sadie. I think it's called I Will Help You Be Rich. It's a really good book. Didn't make my top 10, but he talks about like, he has this theory about reading books. And he says, if he even thinks it might be a good book, he gets it regardless. Instead of taking a lot of time, like agonizing over what book to buy, he just gets it because he says the investment that you make, even if you get just one or two big takeaways that dramatically impact your life, that 15 or 20 or $25 that you spent on that book, it's totally worth the investment. So I've kind of taken that same approach with my book buying recently. I was in a meeting yesterday morning with one of my, I'm mentoring a student who's in the superintendent's classes, some superintendent's classes, and she recommended a book. I can't remember what it was called yesterday, but she told me like one sentence about what the book was like. And I thought, that sounds amazing. So I went right to Amazon as we were talking, ordered it, boom, just like that. So, and sometimes you get burned. Sometimes there are books that you get it and you're like, oh, this isn't really what I was hoping for. And you know what? You just maybe you just put it away. You don't finish it. So maybe you wasted a little bit of money, but more often than not, you're going to get some key takeaway or some key takeaways out of those books that it's just worth getting them. It's worth getting excited about and having it there when you have that time to read. So that's I heard that from Ramit, who said, when in question, get the book, check it out. The investment will be well worth it. It's going to be well worth your $20. We all waste $20 many, many other ways besides buying a bad book. So I think it's a worthy investment. So with that being said, okay, I'm going to dig deep a little bit on my top 10. But I do have the honorable mentions, the 15 through 11. I'm going to read those off real quick for you. And then we'll dig in a little bit or a little bit deeper on the top 10. And if you're watching at home, or if you're watching the episode, I keep looking to my left here because I actually have the books. I'm going to hold them up for the audience. So yeah, you can listen. Most of the people listen on Apple Podcasts. But I've been there's been a lot of views, a lot of watches on YouTube. One of our most recent videos went over 1,000 views. I believe it was the episode about teacher recruitment, which went over 1,000 views. There's a few others that are getting, most of them have a couple hundred views. So, if you want the video, you can watch that at home. So, okay. So my honorable mentions, number 15, my 15th. And again, there's probably there's probably 200 plus books that go all into this, to this list that we get the top 15. And I would say even beyond that, there's a lot more that either I started and didn't finish, or that I like read up on Amazon or online, and I just wasn't that impressed. So I feel like I filtered through to get to the top, 200 plus. So there's probably like another couple hundred that I've kind of filtered through that I'm like, this isn't really my style in terms of the leadership, education, personal growth. So I would say easily, 300 or 400 books that have been considered. And here we are, the top 15 of the books that I, at this moment in time. And that reminds me of one more thing. Like, I do feel like, this top 10 has stayed relatively consistent. But there is room for books to jump in. Absolutely. I think books, I've read a lot of books the second time I'm like, whoa, how'd I miss that? Like, that is so good. So I would say, even if you read a book once and you're like not that impressed, that might be a different place in your life, either in your leadership journey or your personal life, where just at the time it just didn't resonate with you. But if you come back to it a few years later and you read it, it might blow your mind, like how much you missed and how much you've changed. So I just want to say, like, I want to be clear, like, these are my top 10 at the time, at right now, but it doesn't mean that these could not change positions, that we could have new books that come in the top 10, and books that go out. So with that being said, my number 15 book is Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And I'm just going to read, I on my, when I send my top 100 list to the subscribers, I list like a 1-sentence summary. So I'm just going to read those for these here real quick. So Dare to Lead, Brene Brown. It's a leadership and management book. It ranks 6th out of my leadership and management books in that genre. And it says, challenges everything you know about brave leadership and gives you actionable tools for choosing courage over comfort. That is Dare to Lead, Brene Brown. And on my podcast, we ask the guests every time, like, what's your favorite book? And Brene Brown has been mentioned probably the most out of any author. So check out Brene Brown. Pretty darn good. Very hot name right now. Number 14, a gentleman that we had on the show a couple months ago, Mark Horstmann, who wrote The Effective Manager. Love this book. I read it again like a month ago, and I'm like, this is so close to top 10. Couldn't quite crack the top 10, but it's really close. The Effective Manager, Mark Horstmann. And the description I have is, this hands-on practical guide distills the author's management training expertise into clear, actionable steps to start taking today. The Effective Manager, Mark Horstmann. The biggest thing I got from that book, the first half of that book, is about the importance of one-on-one meetings with your staff members. Been a total game changer. I've written about it. Google search Jared Smith one-on-one meetings, like 1:1 meetings. You're going to see a couple blog posts where I've written about this. Number 13 was the best book I read all of last year, and it's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's a personal growth book. It's my 5th rated personal growth book. And it's my summary is a way of processing information that enables you to make the daily choices that will lead to the success and happiness you desire. That is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Awesome book. It was recommended to me by Dr. Jesse Ulrich, the superintendent at Fort Dodge. In our podcast interview, he recommended I read The Slight Edge. I read it and was blown away by that book. Number 12 is probably, he might be my favorite author. And that's saying a lot. I don't know. I'm just saying that off the cuff here. Cal Newport. He's like 37, 38, my age. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He's got 3 books that are just amazing. He's got a podcast that I love that I recommend. But his book, his top rated book for me is Deep Work. Deep Work by Cal Newport, my number 4 rated personal growth book. And it's the ability to harvest deep work is like a superpower in our increasingly competitive 21st century economy. If you like productivity hacks, Cal Newport is amazing. You got to check out his books and his podcast, Deep Work by Cal Newport. Number 11, good old John Maxwell with 21 Laws of Leadership. Man, I reread this last year, and again, so close to top 10. I think before I read it the first time when I was an assistant principal, like 7 or 8 years ago. And I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And I opened it up again like last March, and I was like, let's see if it's as good as I remember. I didn't have high hopes, but I read it again and I was like, man, this is so good. It went higher on my list. So if you want to make a difference in your life and in those around you, these 21 laws should be required reading. Again, John Maxwell, 21 Laws of Leadership. All right, so those were the 5. Those were my 5 honorable mentions. Now we're going to get into my top 10, and we're going to give it a little bit more time here. So number 10 is my second ranked education book. It is Hacking Leadership by Joe Sanfilippo, a former guest on our podcast, and Tony Sinanis. They co-authored this book called Hacking Leadership. And what I've got written down here is, when leaders use a collaborative approach for improvement, achievement soars and schools are full of enthusiastic members. So I saw Joe, one of the authors here, present at a school leaders conference 4 years ago and was blown away. Awesome presentation. I've heard him a couple times since, and I was like, I got to get this book. But I'm going to read, with my top 10, I'm going to read just my 3 big takeaways. So you kind of get an idea of what the biggest takeaways are for those books. And at least it kind of guides you in the right way. My hope is that you hear a few of my recommendations and that you end up purchasing them. And, I'm an educator. I want to teach others what I've learned and what I've picked up. And so here's my 3 big takeaways. And they're really just excerpts. And again, this is all straight from my website. I've printed off just the pages from my summaries. But here's the 3 big takeaways from Hacking Leadership. Number 1, the daily work of a school leader is no longer just being administrator or manager or even a boss. Instead, a school leader needs to model transformative practices so that innovating becomes a norm. Sitting in an office, checking emails, and efficiently completing paperwork does not fulfill the needs of the modern school. Effective leaders put learning at the center of daily work. The time has come to emphasize authentic and personalized learning experiences, not just policies, mandates, and test scores. Takeaway number 2, communication is the beating heart of school culture. The positive impact of an accessible school leader who communicates well and relates well with others circulates throughout the entire system. Clear, consistent communication fosters transparency, so all members of the school community share important information. If leaders communicate in a genuine way, the trust they earn contributes to an even more positive environment. Be aware, though, that constant communication and transparent practice have positive effects only if a school leader can personally validate that his or her decisions have been made to benefit the children. And my third key takeaway from Hacking Leadership is culture and test scores don't need to be mutually exclusive, meaning we can definitely focus on school culture and know that in the long term, positive culture will have an impact on test scores. We know that when children attend a school where they feel valued, confident, and happy, their learning will benefit. When students are actively engaged and have ownership of their learning, chances are they will perform well in all academic areas. Of course, This is only possible if the teachers are feeling similarly. To create a setting where students and teachers thrive and feel genuine joy, leaders must focus on school culture. So, if that sounds like a book that you'd be interested in, I thought it was amazing. Couldn't put it down. Like I said, I had Joe on the show. Let me just look it up real quick here. Joe was on the show. It was a while ago. Episode number 33. Just it was Joe's awesome. So take a listen to that. Order the book. That's my number 10. Number 9 is a personal growth book. My number 3, my top rated fitness book. It is Thinner This Year by Chris Crowley and Jen Sacek. Okay, so why was this my top fitness book? Because I've read a handful of fitness books. If you haven't heard, last week I got an episode that's been going really good. It's called I Don't Want No Dad Bod, right? I don't want a dad bod. I'm going to be turning 39 this week, okay? And I recently dug out a picture of me when I was 21, and needless to say, I gained a few pounds since high school because I'd had a few beverages and had a few late night pizzas. Let's just say that. So I read this book, oh gosh, 4 or 5 years ago. It was recommended to me from my dad. Perfect book for any male or female, for any age, but really if you're in that 30 to 40 to 50 age range where, okay, if I don't start working out, I'm going to probably end up gaining weight that I don't want. And it's just going to go downhill from there. This is great motivation. Okay. It's called Thinner This Year. And here's the summary or the quick one-liner. The book that tells every reader how to lose weight, discover new vitality, and get in the best shape of your life. So it talks working out. It gives you a workout plan. It talks dieting. It gives you some diet tips. Here's the 3 takeaways. And these 3 are a lot shorter than the last ones that I read, but they're huge. Number 1, exercise 6 days a week for the rest of your life. Number 2, big takeaway. You can eat almost anything once in a while and get away with it, especially if you're exercising on a regular basis. What you cannot do is eat bad stuff all the time. And big takeaway number 3, the iron rule of weight gain and loss reads like this in its entirety. Eat more calories than you burn and you will gain weight. Burn more calories than you eat and you will lose weight. That's it. So if you want to hear like a full hour's worth of that discussion about the calories in versus calories out, listen to that episode from last week. I Don't Want No Dad Bod. I go into that a lot. I talk about calorie deficiency and why that's important. This was really one of the first books that's hammered it home for me. It's been hammered home in a few other books that I've read since. Again, if this topic is of interest to you, I'd go back to the episode number 52 and listen. And speaking of, you can eat almost anything once in a while and get away with it. I talked last week about cheat nights, which means like if you're good throughout the week, like you have a day to look forward to and a night like of just going crazy on food and beverages. And tonight's that night for me, and I cannot wait. I don't know what I'm gonna eat when I get done here. I'm gonna figure out dinner, and man, so many options. So I will leave it at that. Thinner This Year, my number 9 book. All right, number 8 is my top rated finance book. It is The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, my top rated finance book. And my one-liner is Dave Ramsey provides a simple, straightforward game plan for completely making over your personal finance habits. I wrote a blog post about Total Money Makeover. My dad gave this to me for like my 27th birthday. I don't know how old I was. And I wasn't super excited to to get the book. But I eventually read it. And if you're looking for a proven, a lot of people just go through life like not really operating with the budget and not really being conscientious about how they're spending their money. Dave can be polarizing. There's no question. He's come under heat a lot in the media recently for some things that he said. I don't listen to those things too much. I kind of just, I look at what he's trying to teach in terms of the content. I try to avoid some of the extra comments that he makes because he can be kind of polarizing. But this book is awesome. I had somebody reach out to me last month and say, what Dave Ramsey book would you recommend? He's got a handful of books. I said, hands down, The Total Money Makeover. Been doing his system basically since, he's got a system. He's going to talk you through some baby steps on how you get control of your finances, how you know where money's going, how to spend your money. Been doing this for like 10 years and it has proved huge dividends. I really didn't, I'm looking at my review here. I didn't identify the top 3 takeaways, but I'm just going to go over his 6 baby steps real quick. If this interests you, I would go ahead and order the book if you haven't, or go revisit it. So his 6 baby steps are this. Baby step 1, first save $1,000 cash as a starter emergency fund. Baby step number 2, you start your debt snowball. So you start paying off debt. Baby step number 3. So these are steps you would take. These are his steps, and these are just well known. I mean, he's got millions of listeners and readers. Baby step number 3: finish the emergency fund, which means that getting that 1,000 up to like 3 months worth of expenses. Baby step number 4 is making sure that you're investing 15% of your income into retirement. Baby step 5 is saving for college if you have kids. Baby step 6 is paying off your home mortgage. Maybe that sounds crazy. A lot of people out there don't pay off their home. I'm bad about that. I'm starting to chip away a little bit, but that's once you've got all those other things taken away, he talks about paying off that home mortgage. So if you are looking for a great personal finance book, look no further than The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. That was number 8. Book number 7 is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Okay, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And my one-liner is, this book offers a guide to those bewildered or exhausted by management. Written for bosses and those who manage bosses. Here are my 3 key takeaways. When preparing to give criticism, try not to think about it too much. If you think about it too much, you're likely going to wimp out and say nothing. You should spend as much time thinking about how to praise someone as when you criticize someone. Key takeaway number 2, if someone on your team is having a personal issue, give them the time they need and don't have them worry about work. Don't count this as your vacation time. Just take the time. We have you covered. Number 3, when you receive criticism, whatever you do, don't start criticizing the criticism. Don't start telling the other person they are wrong. Instead, repeat what the person said to make sure you've understood it, rather than defending yourself against the criticism you've just heard. Listen and clarify, but don't try to debate. You'll feel a strong urge to act defensively or to at least explain yourself. This is natural, but it pretty much will kill any chance that you'll get criticism from that person again. And one more reason why I would put this book up there is I mentioned one-on-one meetings was the topic of the effective manager. Actually, this is where I read it first, and I read about one-on-one meetings. Kim is a big proponent of those meetings. I read about that like 4 or 5 years ago and have implemented those meetings ever since. So I would say, this gives a good overview of one-to-one meetings. The effective manager gives a much more in-depth overview of one-to-one meetings. You can't go wrong with either one. Kim Scott, number 7, Radical Candor. Number 6, Stephen Covey, The Total Money Makeover. I'm sorry. I'm looking. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey. This is book number 6, the 6th rated. This number 2 on my personal growth list. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The one-liner I've got here. Most of you have heard the 7 Habits before, but here's my one-liner. Covey's beloved classic presents a principle-centered approach for solving both personal and professional problems. Here's my key takeaways. Keeping a commitment or a promise is a major deposit. Breaking one is a major withdrawal. In fact, there's probably not a more massive withdrawal than to make a promise that's important to someone and then not to come through. Number 2, the cause of almost all relationship difficulties is rooted in conflicting or ambiguous expectations around roles and goals. That's why it's so important whenever you come into a new situation to get all the expectations out on the table. That takes a real investment of time and effort up front, but it saves great amounts of time and effort down the long run. And number 3, there's no better way to inform and expand your mind on a regular basis than to get into the habit of reading good literature. You can get into the best minds that are now or have ever been in the world. So again, 7 Habits, it's big. It's, over 25 million copies sold. A lot of you have probably already read this. I was a little skeptical when I read it at first. I just wasn't quite sure, but I read it. And wow, it's some good stuff. So that is my number 6 book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. All right, number 5 by Todd Whittaker, another guest on the show. Todd was on the show, a couple months ago. What episode was it? It was episode number 40. A lot of you have listened to that show or watched it on YouTube, but Todd episodes, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective. Man, I am sorry. What Great Principles Do Differently by Todd Whittaker is Todd's book. What Great Principles Do Differently. I explained in the Todd Whittaker episode that prior to reading this book in like 2012, I was not a huge reader. I just didn't think, I'd pretty much been burnt out from high school, college, my master's classes, and was kind of done with reading. Didn't think I needed to read. Didn't think I needed to learn anymore. I had it all figured out. But I actually read that book as part of a book study and was like, wow, this is so good. The reason it was so good for me was because there was a lot of things in this book that I thought as an educational leader I should be doing, but I wasn't seeing other people do them. And so I guess I was thinking, well, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe the other educational leaders that I've been around or seen, maybe I should follow their way, which I didn't think was best practice. This book really opened my eyes to like, okay, you do know what you're talking about. Like, have faith, have confidence that you're doing the right thing. So Todd's book is awesome. Here's my one-liner, which says, with heartfelt advice and practical wisdom, Todd Whittaker explains the qualities and practices that distinguish great principles. That is my number 1 education book, What Great Principles Do Differently. Here's my 3 big takeaways. Number 1, the most valuable gift a principal can give teachers is confidence. The most valuable gift a teacher can give a student is confidence. Number 2, we never yell, argue, or use sarcasm. That never works. We never win an argument. They won't back down in the front of their peers. Kids won't, meaning they are probably better at it than we are in terms of arguing. As a school, we also understand that we do not get into arguments with parents, other staff, or anyone else. It's not a matter of giving up or giving in. It's a matter of being professional. Takeaway number 3. What matters most were effective lesson plans for the students, not neat lesson plans for me. This is terms of being a principal and seeing what the teachers were doing. There appears to be little connection between an effective teacher and a tidy book or nice looking lesson plans on the district server. When I thought about my best teachers, I realized they must see this requirement as another hassle, meaning lesson plans. I have nothing against planning for lessons, and it might be a good idea to review the lesson plans of a poorly prepared teacher. But I decided not to take any time away from what mattered, which was engaging with students effectively. So again, Todd Whittaker's book is awesome. He's got a ton of books, but I would say for educational leaders, for principals, superintendents, aspiring leaders, that's the place to go. What great principals do differently. And I believe when I asked Todd that question about what his favorite book is that he's authored, I'm pretty sure he said that was the one. So coming right out of the author's mouth, that's his favorite book. All right, number 4. I just need a quick drink real quick here. All right, number 4 is The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. It is my top rated psychology book. And the one-liner is why certain experiences can change us and how we can learn to create such extraordinary moments in our work and life. So, what's really cool about this book is that right away, these guys, I forget Chip or Dan, one of them is has either been in education or just researches education. This book, even though it's psychology, has a lot of connections to schools, has a lot of connections to education. So woven throughout this book are examples of schools where this idea of power of moments, where we're creating powerful moments for students, like I said, is kind of woven throughout this book. Here's my 3 big takeaways from the book. The lack of attention paid to an employee's first day is mind-boggling. To avoid this kind of oversight, we must understand when special moments are needed. We must learn to think in moments, to spot the occasions that are worthy of investment. Number 2, even though high school students log more time in the classroom than anywhere else, their most memorable experiences rarely take place in school or in the school setting. Instead, they remember prom, football games, musical productions, and talent shows. And number 3, does it pay off for all these moments? Can you measure it? Does it show up on the bottom line? Yes. Think of all the tangible outcomes: more revenue, greater customer satisfaction, more motivated employees, more effective employees, more happiness, close relationship, and self-transformation. So again, this book is about being intentional, about creating powerful moments in everything that you do, but really, from an educational leader standpoint, for students or for your staff. So I've written about this a lot in terms of how here in our district, we try to create some key moments for students and for staff to really make them memorable for those people. So without getting into it too much, that is my number 4 book, Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Number 3 is Principles by Ray Dalio. And it's spelled principles with the principles with the LES at the end, not PAL, not like school principal. It's like principles and values. So if you're looking on the YouTube video, this is not the actual like normal cover you will see in the bookstore. The actual cover fell off or got damaged in my transportation here. So this is kind of just the normal plasticky book cover's gone. But it's a pretty simple book cover. But here's the one-liner. Dalio, who is a very well-known business person, shares the unconventional principles he's developed, refined, and used to create unique results in both life and business. And with all these books, some of these I haven't read for a while, so I'm just kind of, I'm like, oh, it's been a while. I hope I'm saying these things right. But I believe in this book, he splits it up like half of it is his principles for business, and the other half of it is his principles for life. And these are like the gosh, I could get in this quite a bit, but the idea that you always fall back on key principles or core values when you're making decisions. And he has spent like his whole life like developing these, and he's written them out kind of like in a journal format a little bit. Oh my gosh, I'm just looking at my 3 big takeaways from principles, and I've got a ton written. So I'm just going to read the first one because I've got a lot written here. But the first takeaway, which I'm just going to kind of summarize what this book is about, is principles are fundamental truths that serve as the foundations for behavior that gets you what you want out of life. They can be applied again and again in similar situations to help you achieve your goals. Every day, each of us is faced with a blizzard of situations we must respond to. Without principles, we would be forced to react to all the things life throws at us individually, as if we were experiencing each of them for the first time. If instead we classify these situations into types and have good principles for dealing with them, we will make better decisions more quickly and have better lives as a result. Having a good set of principles is like having a good collection of recipes for success. All successful people operate by principles that help them be successful, though what they choose to be successful at varies enormously. So the principles vary. To be principled means to consistently operate with principles that can be clearly explained. Unfortunately, most people can't do that, and it's very rare for people to write their principles down and share them. This is a huge book. It's like 500 plus, close to 600 pages. So if that intimidates you, that might be a deterrent. I've learned that, like, for me, I'm looking at the books over there, and some are short, some are long. Doesn't, maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, like, I'm not going to get a super long book. It's just going to take way too long to get through. I'm telling you, this book is packed with good stuff. If what I read to you resonates, if this idea about relying on principles for making decisions is something that you've thought about, I know I've read that in a couple other books. This is like amazing. You got to check it out. It starts kind of slow, I believe, but then as you get into it, it's awesome. All right, number 2 is The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. It's my number 1 leadership and management book. I was attending a church up in where I was living as an assistant principal. I asked the pastor of the church for an author to start reading, and he recommended Patrick. I don't know if it's Lencioni or Lencioni. I believe it might be Lencioni. But The Advantage. So most of Lencioni's books are written as like a parable, where they're kind of a story that tells, kind of gives like some morals or some virtues to learn from. I'm not a huge fan of those. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't love stories. This book is not. It's not like a parable. It's not stories. It's just like quick hitters after quick hitters. So if you're looking for Lencioni book to start, I would say start with The Advantage. I've read 5 or 6 others of his, not nearly as impressed as The Advantage. Here's the one-liner. No better way to achieve profound improvement in an organization than by attacking dysfunction, politics, and confusion. I love those words, dysfunction, politics, and confusion. I don't love those words, but I feel like they're so, in schools, there's so much dysfunction, politics, and confusion that I feel like there's so many great truths about educational leadership in this book. Here are the 3 big takeaways. Number 1, organizational health includes minimal politics and confusion, high levels of morale and productivity, and low turnover among good employees. Number 2, there's probably no greater frustration for employees than having to constantly navigate the politics and confusion caused by leaders who are misaligned. Number 3, No action, activity, or process is more central to a healthy organization than the meeting. There is no better way to have a fundamental impact on an organization than by changing the way it does meetings. In fact, if someone were to offer me one single piece of evidence to evaluate the health of an organization, I would want to observe the leadership team during a meeting. The advantage, I think I've read this 3 or 4 times. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh, should this be number one? It's so close. It's so good. I think it's great for school leaders. It is my number one rated leadership and management book. And well, before we get to number one, let's count down from 10 to 2, just so you didn't miss, in case you missed one of those, in case you're fast forwarding and you're just hearing the title of the books like I do sometimes. We will go back and give you 10 through 2, and then we'll share number one, and then we will let you go here. Number 10, Hacking Leadership by Joe Sanfilippo and Tony Sinanis. Number 9, Thinner This Year by Chris Crowley and Jennifer Sacek. Number 8, The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Number 7, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Number 6, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Number 5, What Great Principles Do Differently by Todd Whittaker. Number 4, Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Number 3, Principles by Ray Dalio. Number 2, The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. And my number one book. And it's, I've only read it once, so I need to reread this again because this book has some competition. Some of these books are like really on this book's heels. But my number one book is Atomic Habits by James Clear. James has been one of the hottest names out there here the last few years. One of the biggest, coolest things is I believe he's like my age, like he's like 38, 39 years old. But this is my number one personal growth book. And the reason I got it number one, quite honestly, is I read it like 2 years ago and I was kind of in a rut. I was kind of just complacent. I wasn't really feeling motivated. I wasn't eating the right foods. My workouts were blah. My personal growth, my just leadership. I think I was finishing up my first year as being a superintendent. Not that things were going bad, but I was kind of maybe burnt out a little bit. And I read this book. It had just came out. And I was blown away. It has totally changed how I have done things ever since. So my one-liner is: practical strategies teach you exactly how to form good habits and master the tiny behaviors that lead to remarkable results. So as the title indicates, Atomic Habits, if you want to build good habits in your life, this is an awesome book for that. There's a lot of books out there about how to build good habits. I've read a lot of habit books since. It probably helps that I read this book first before I read some of the other books about habits. So for all these books, it's like if I read a topic first, it's probably the freshest. The first time I heard it probably gives it a little bit more weight in terms of me liking that book. So again, it's probably helps that it was read first, but it's awesome. Here's my 3 key takeaways. They're short. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. They seem to make a little difference on any given day, but the impact they deliver over the months can be enormous. Number 2, always think, does this behavior help me become the type of person I wish to be? Does this habit contribute toward my desired identity? Number 3, the average person spends over 2 hours a day on social media. What could you do with an extra 600 hours per year? So again, if you're wanting some motivation, some ideas on how to improve your habits, I know we're like 2 months past New Year's resolutions. So maybe we're a little late on that, but it's never too late to start new habits. So there it is, my top 10 books. I hope you enjoyed hearing those. I would love to hear, if I'm missing some books, and I'm always looking for new books. Let me know. Reach out to me and say, hey, you missed one, or hey, I agree. Hey, I disagree. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, I just love, I almost, not all the books on this list, but as I keep getting more and more books, everything has come through word of mouth, whether it's on the podcast or just something on Twitter or just with somebody I work with. Almost every book recently has been word of mouth. So I hope this helps you out. I hope this helped explain my very subjective list. It's just based on how much they've impacted my life. I'm not saying they're the best written books. I don't know if they've won any awards or not, but to me, they have impacted my life, and therefore they are my top 10 books. And again, they're mostly in the genres of like that leadership, education, personal growth, which is what we're doing on this show. So again, I hope you enjoyed this episode number 54, my top 10 books of all time. And again, if you enjoy this show, or if you enjoyed this show, I encourage you to subscribe on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. On Apple Podcasts, I encourage you to drop that 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. I've got these new videos coming out once or twice a week, and we're picking up steam here. So I'm going to go head home here. I'm going to have my cheat night meal, which is going to be a lot of calories consumed in the next few hours. I cannot wait. I look forward to this night all week. So I'm going to let you go. Enjoy your night, and we'll see you next time on the Group Project Podcast.